Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Metroid Samus Returns, the chronological sequel to Metroid Zero Mission. This is the next game on my Metroid marathon. However, chronologically the Prime games take place in between the first Metroid and the second Metroid. I don't have access to these Prime games, however, and I'm only focusing on 2D games in preparation for Metroid Dread. However, if you want to get technical, I would have played the Metroid Prime games in between these two. This is the only Metroid game that I have played before this whole Metroid marathon, and before Zero Mission, this was my only 2D Metroid experience. This game is only available on the 3DS. I'm very sorry about the gameplay footage here. It's pretty much my only option to aim the camera at my 3DS. I don't have the knowledge myself to mod my 3DS to capture footage on like some sort of capture card either, so it is what it is. So there is a little more plot introduced in this game than in Metroid Zero Mission, and it kind of explains some things from Metroid Zero Mission, so I'm going to do my best to explain what is going on here. In the first Metroid Zero Mission, some scientists took some Metroids from planet SR388. And they were going to study these Metroids. However, space pirates took the Metroids and they started cloning the Metroids in order to create basically like these weapons of mass destruction. They were cloning the Metroids. So Samus was tasked to go to planet Zebes and destroy all the Metroids and the Mother Brain, which was like the leader of the space pirates. That's all what happened in the first one. In this one, I guess the Federation decided like, hey, these Metroids are too dangerous. If they happen to fall into the space pirates' hands again, it's just going to be bad news. So we're just going to have to commit genocide on these Metroids from the planet of origin, the SR388. Just go ahead and destroy all the Metroids that you find on this planet, so it never falls into the space pirates' hands again. So you have this little counter that shows how many Metroids are left on this planet, and there are 40. So basically your task is to explore this new planet and basically kill all of those Metroids. Now these Metroids, you may not know, evolve over time, so they don't all look like the Metroid that you're familiar with, the floating thing with the little teeth below it. Over time, they kind of get into a cocoon like a butterfly, and over time you'll find like the husks of these old Metroids, and you'll encounter new and more evolved, more dangerous Metroids over time, especially the longer you go. So like the last couple of Metroids are going to be really big and scary. However, I think it's kind of lame that the Metroids lose their power of flight over time. I don't know, I feel like I'd rather fly than crawl around and look like a monstrous dinosaur. They do look very cool though, and I do like fighting a lot of these last Metroids. They are very intense bosses. Some of them tend to run away, however, which is probably one of my bigger gripes about this game. Is most of the time you'll be fighting the second stage of the Metroids and the third stage. And the third stage in particular really likes to run away because they realize that they are fighting a losing battle, and then you have to move around the map again and hunt them once more. It can be a little tedious because you're in the middle of a fight fighting these Metroids, and they just decide they're running away, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. There's no way to kill these Metroids before they move on to their next fighting grounds. You just have to hunt them, and I kind of get what they're going for here, the whole hunter versus the hunted kind of thing here, but it just totally breaks up the fight and breaks up all momentum you have. Each area is blocked off. This is kind of more sectioned off. I'm not sure, because this was a remake of the original Game Boy game, Return of Samus, I think it's called. I'm not sure exactly how it compares one-to-one, but this one is broken off into sections, and Zero Mission was also broken into sections, but you are going through, like, you're backtracking through these sections a lot of the time. In this one, it's more progressional, where, okay, hunt down 7 Metroids in this area, and then once you turn in that set amount of Metroids, it drains this, like, poisonous fluid, so then you can progress further into the next area. These Chozo statues, these ancient alien statues, it'll give you this little indicator of how many more you have to hunt in this area in order to progress to the next chapter. Chapter. But other than finding additional missile capacities and upgrades, you don't have much incentive to backtrack, which I actually like Zero Mission more in this aspect, because you really get that sense of progression when you're going back and you're fighting these weaker enemies now that you're so much stronger. This one doesn't really have that. It's just next area to next area. There's not much reason to backtrack other than it going for those upgrades when you unlock new abilities. Fighting off the enemies can get a little repetitive. Like I said, you're fighting 40 of these Metroids. Granted, they do evolve over time, so there's some variety there. But as far as like the common enemies, I want to say there's only, I don't know, like 6 or 7 enemies, and as you progress through the game, these enemies change color to represent that they are stronger, but visually they still look the same, and they still function relatively the same as their easier counterparts at the beginning of the game. There are some really intense and exciting events here, some cool looking bosses that you couldn't have done on the Game Boy Advance, some cinematics that make Samus just look so awesome. So just some really hype moments to break up the momentum. Sometimes I feel like this game can get a little tedious just because of the repetitive enemies, and this is probably one of the longest Metroid games. I'm only assuming because just comparing Zero Mission to this one, but my clear time at the end of this was 7 hours and 23 minutes compared to my 3 hours and something minutes with Zero Mission. So it's still a shorter of a game, but it is one of the longer Metroid games, I'm guessing, because I don't think Super Metroid is that long either. I'm excited to find out, however. I didn't go back to the older areas and unlock all of the other stuff that I possibly could have. Ideally, if this is my only game, like my only Metroid game that I want to play, you'd want a longer Metroid game, but if you are going through a Metroid marathon, such as I am, and you have a deadline before Metroid Dread comes out, a longer game is almost kind of a con in my opinion. It doesn't feel like you are getting upgraded as frequently or often as in the Metroid Zero Mission 2, because it is a longer game. They probably have the same amount of upgrades, but it is spaced out between more gameplay. At the beginning of this game, Samus is in her yellow and orange suit. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but I thought it would have been cool if she had her power suit that she unlocked in Metroid Zero Mission. I understand why they did it, but they didn't really. I'd just be curious, like maybe some sort of fan fiction or something, why she lost all her abilities and she has to start over. Obviously, from a gameplay perspective, it's because it wants, that's how a Metroid game is. You start out with almost no abilities and you unlock them over the course of the game. It just doesn't, there's just no narrative reason why she lost all of her abilities from Metroid Zero Mission. Perhaps in the Metroid Prime games, though, there's some good explanation. I didn't really think about that earlier. Samus does start out with more abilities than she had in Metroid Zero Mission, however. Her little pea shooters actually go far rather than dissipating after a short amount of time. She can grab onto ledges, just a couple things like that. There are some gameplay quality of life changes in this 3DS version, as well as this being one of the newest Metroid games. Because we have the control stick with the 3DS, we are able to aim in all 360 degrees rather than just 8 different directions from the traditional Metroid games. So that's very, very nice, and it's going to be hard for me to go back to a Super Nintendo Metroid after playing this one, just because of all the quality of lives. One of the big gimmicks about this Metroid 2 is she has the ability to counter enemy attacks. So right before an enemy strikes Samus, it will kind of blink a little bit, and this will be some indication that you are able to counter this attack. So she swings her arm cannon up, and then you are able to do an extra stronger shot. If you're fighting a boss and they do this, and you are able to time that counter just right, sometimes it can be a little hard against some of these bosses or these Metroids. You get this pretty cool cinematic, and you are able to rack up a ton of damage against these bosses too. It's just very hard for me to get the timing right. It takes a lot of practice, though. At the beginning of the game, in particular, it kind of relies on you to use this counter ability even for the basic enemies. This will change over time, like as you progress through the game and you get access to the really overpowered screw attack, or your arm cannon does a lot stronger damage. You don't really need need to rely on this counter as much as you do at the beginning of the game. I did notice that this counter, just from the trailers and everything, this will be featured in Metroid Dread, and I'm curious to see if they rely on this as heavily as they did in Metroid Samus Returns. Another cool thing added to Samus's arsenal are Aeon abilities. Now, Samus's suit gets access to 4 of these like powerful abilities, and this drains her Aeon gauge, and you can get more of this Aeon gauge as you defeat regular enemies. That's more incentive to defeat them. But one of my favorite abilities that is given to you at the very beginning of the game is a pulse scan. Now, this will kind of do this little shockwave around Samus, and on your mini map on the bottom screen, it will reveal your map around you, and this will also reveal where hidden destructible walls are. I've heard a lot of old school Metroid fans not really like this. They say it makes it too easy, but I definitely think it's an improvement, and I'd much rather have a pulse scan compared to just hitting every single random tile in a room with a missile hoping to find some secret hidden wall. This is just so much easier, and I definitely like doing this a lot more than finding a map room and revealing a whole section of the map. This way I can just reveal sections of the map as I move along and I explore. I didn't really talk about this in my Zero mission review. I just love how she eventually can just fly. She just she gets spinning into her jump, and eventually you can just fly. Like, you don't have to hit the ground, you can just jump, and she just hovers in the air. Pair this especially with her screw attack, and I just think this is what makes Samus so strong and overpowered at the end of the game, and I absolutely love it. Another quality of life that this game has over Metroid Zero Mission are fast travel points, so you can just quickly go from one point to another. This also wouldn't make it too bad to backtrack if I really wanted to go back and get all of that all those additional upgrades, because I could just fast travel between the points. And if we're talking about the map functionality, I just think that this is one thing that the Switch loses, is that extra touchscreen. I feel like it was so beneficial to have that big old mini-map on the bottom screen while my gameplay was going on at the top screen. Plus, I was able to place pins on certain points of interest that I wasn't able to access yet until I unlocked more abilities. I just think every Metroidvania needs to have the ability to place pins. And granted, I know this is more of like a modern day Metroidvania thing, but it's certainly appreciated, and I would be surprised if Metroid Dread did not have the ability to place pins on the minimap. It's just nice for past me to let my future self know, like, hey, I did explore this area, but I can't access it yet until I get a certain ability, because oftentimes when I'm playing older Metroidvania games where this isn't a feature, I keep going back to the same areas because I don't realize that, hey, I'm not able to progress to this area anymore. It's already been explored, don't worry about it, look elsewhere. Visually, it looks nice. This is, I want to say, the first, Metroid 2D Metroid, at least, that has 3D models in it, and there's a lot of cool things going on in the background that make this feel like a real world, a real planet that you are exploring. Just a lot of mechanical machines moving, or sometimes you see little creatures skittering across the walls. It just makes it feel a little more realistic compared to the Game Boy Advance or the Super Nintendo graphics. I definitely feel like something is lost by this more modern take, however. One of the things being the music. I think I like the music in Metroid Zero Mission better than this one. It feels more electronic sci-fi compared to like echoey and haunting. That maybe I'm just a sucker for that bit-tune music. Compared to more of this orchestrated style, but I think that's just more of a personal preference. I definitely think that the music is good in this one too, though. This game does feature amiibo support, surprise, surprise, but guess what? I do not have the 2-pack Metroid amiibo. That unlocks a really cool feature for this game. It gives you it's kind of like a hard mode for Samus, and it gives Samus the fusion suit that I guess she unlocks in Metroid Fusion. I'm just taking an educated guess here, but I definitely think that would have been a cool feature to have. I don't have that 2-pack, however, and getting it is very expensive if you're buying it off of eBay, like mid $100 to $200. So you're going to be spending an arm and a leg if you want those amiibos, and I definitely get where other people are coming from, non-amiibo collectors, when they complain about big features like this being locked behind amiibo, because if you can't get the amiibo, then you don't get the feature. I did have a couple of other Metroid amiibo though, and they basically give you like an additional energy tank, just little quality of life things like that, but nothing cool like a whole a gameplay feature being locked behind one. Overall, I think I enjoyed my experience playing Metroid Zero Mission more than this. There's a couple reasons that I would guess this is. One being I've already played Metroid Samus Returns before, and Metroid Zero Mission was a completely new experience for me. That's probably the biggest reason. The other reason that I think I enjoyed it more is because it was a shorter experience, and I'm trying to do this marathon, so I felt maybe a little more rushed to rush through Samus Returns. I still think that Metroid Samus Returns is an amazing game, and definitely don't sleep on it if you have a 3DS. I am going to give this the score of 5 out of 5 as well. And if I'm just to speculate here, I think it gives you a nicer peek at what Metroid Dread is going to be, just as far as gameplay goes and visually, compared to the more 16-bit graphics of the older Metroids, especially if you include that counter ability. It's just a nice little peek of what it's going to be like. And it certainly makes me excited to play Metroid Dread. I have 2 more Metroids to play through, and time is running out, so time is of the essence. It's time for me to get out the Switch again, put the old 3DS back into retirement as I am hopping into Super Metroid. So tune in soon for that. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Metroid Samus Returns or Metroid in general. How's your Metroid marathon going in preparation for Metroid Dread? I'd love to hear it all. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!